we'll just be using those service suction Dracos as we get closer to the International Space Station again, very fine-tuned. And this, I just noticed, is very cool. On the left side of your screen, a little, if you're looking towards the top of the International Space Station or towards the top of your screen, you can see
Evet, bugün yeni bir yayınla beraber karşınızdayım. Bugün Falcon 9'un 7. operasyonel insanlı uzay uçuşunu izleyeceğiz. Bakalım nasıl olacak. Bir dakika. Hemen bir yayını kontrol edeceğim. Acaba bir sorun var mı? Hemen bir yayını kontrol edeceğim. Acaba bir sorun var mı?
We are in that orbital daytime. We are now flying over the Atlantic Ocean, so we have at this point passed over the continental U.S., North America.
Şu an bir kişi var canlı.
And on your left-hand screen is a view inside of Dragon. Your left-hand side is Commander Jasmine Mogbelli, and on your right-hand side is the pilot for this mission, Andreas Mogeson. Again, they are just monitoring. They are able to confirm, on their displays that what they
Bugün Falcon 9'un dediğim gibi Dragon'un 7. operasyonel insanlı uzay uçuşu görevini izleyeceğiz. Evet, şu anda bakalım insanlık için çok heyecanlı. Eğer bu görevler başarılı olursa belki bundan yıllar sonra artık ne kadar bilmiyoruz ama belki 10 yıl, belki 15 yıl sonra ya da daha erken de olabilir. Artık normal insanları göndermeye başlayacak. Yani normal insanlara kastım. Bildiğiniz sıradan, yani bir zannediyorum bir yere katılmanız gerekmeyecek yani. Atıyorum yani orada çalışmanız gerekmeyecek bir şey. Çünkü şu an orada bazen çoğunlukla çalışanlar oraya gidebiliyor. Yani orada çalışan kişiler. Ama gelecekte böyle olmayacak. Bir nevi en azından Elon Musk'ın dediğine göre bayağı hızlı bir şekilde gidip gelecekmişiz. Yani bir nevi metroya binip başka bir yere gitmek diyor. Ama bakalım. Elon Musk şey diyordu. Ben gitmeyeceğim diyordu ama. Doğru aslında, bir yandan mantıklı. Yani adam çünkü bir şey olursa bunu ilerleten kim olacak yani? Ama bilemeyiz. Belki evet, astronotların kamera şey oldu ama evet, dünyanın şu an tersten görüyoruz galiba. Süper ya. Hep hayalim var ya. En büyük, daha doğrusu hep hayalim ya. En büyük hayalim. Vallahi oraya bir gün gitmek yani. Zaten kimin değil ki. Herkesin farklıdır da çoğunluğun öyle. 4K'yı açarsam ne olur? Neyse, açmayayım şimdi. Sesi arttırabilirim ama benim ses az geliyor. O yüzden neyse açayım biraz.
As Dragon approached waypoint 0 was directly under the International Space Station. As it moves to waypoint 1, it's actually going to swing up and align itself with the space station. So you no longer will be looking down from the space station and have that view of Earth in the background, because it will be aligned with the docking port, which is the zenith port today. It's the space
Baksanıza çok güzel ya.
of the International Space Station.
Çok iyi oğlum. Abi en büyük. Vallahi keşke en büyük hayalim.
Once our astronauts arrive and our cosmonaut arrive to the International
Mars'ın
Space
üstünde
Station today,
böyle
they will be members of Expedition 69. That will
Mars'ın üstünde böyle zıplaya zıplaya gitmek. Bir tane video vardı. NASA'nın
these titles that they have right now.
NASA'nın kanalının en böyle ilk yüklediği videolardan biriydi. Bir tane astronot ya da şey miydi lan o? Neil Armstrong muydu? Onun videosu muydu acaba? Galiba. Ha onun da olabilir bak. Kesin onundur ha. Onun videosunda böyle bir tane adam zıplaya zıplaya. Tamam da oydu doğru. Çok güzel. Hayalim onu yapmak. Ama Mars'ta da değil. Onlar Ay'a gitmişti. Bakalım. Kapsül gibi bir şey.
We're about 25 minutes until we expect to reach waypoint 1.
Galiba
Sorry, about
25
35 minutes, I believe.
dakikaya oraya
And that's that
varmasını
220 meter. It can be used as a
hesapladı
hold
değil mi?
point. I don't think we intend to use it as a hold point today, but it is on the docking axis. It'll be directly above the International Space Station, directly above that zenith port on node 2.
İngilizce acaba şey mi? Türkçe var mı diye baktım ama yok. Neyse sıkıntı yok, ben çevirebildiğim kadar çevireceğim. Evet, hala şu an gökyüzünde süzülmekte. Sessizlik var. Bakalım. Çok hızlı gidiyormuş gibi geliyor ya. Ama sanki acaba yavaş mı gidiyor ki? Ama zannediyorum şu an uzayda da değil galiba. Daha şu an dünya gözüküyor ama. Evet, ne oluyor?
All right, and a reminder, we are taking your questions on X with the hashtag AskNASA. We have one from Sahid asking if there are any problems with docking if they are on the dark side of the Earth, which it does happen several times a day. We see that happen about every
Evet, dünyanın
90 minutes, or sorry, a sunrise, sunset every 45
karanlık
minutes.
tarafı.
And do they face visibility issues? So Dragon is fully autonomous. It uses LiDAR to track the International Space Station and to line up with that docking
Soru
port.
sorabilirsiniz
Crew
galiba.
members
Soru
do have
sormuşlar.
the opportunity to take control if
NASA
needed, but they don't necessarily need to wait for that lighting.
hashtag'iyle
Dragon knows where the
X'te
station's
yani
docking port
Twitter'da
is.
artık
And
X
we
olduğu
have
için
lights out on the exterior of the International Space Station anyway. So sometimes we do hold for lighting just to double confirm, just to make sure. But there is usually no problem docking in darkness.
Yeah, I believe it's actually more of a problem when it's too bright. So when it's too bright, they do take a pause and wait for it to get a little bit darker, just to make sure that, again, because this is an autonomous vehicle, make sure that the Dragon spacecraft can actually see the International Space Station.
Bakalım ne olacak.
And we are taking questions on X with the hashtag AskNASA. And this one is, where can I see the post-launch news
Yayında biraz
conference
gecikme
from
var ama.
yesterday? And also, you're doing a good job. Good job,
Thank you
Leah.
so much. Good job, Jesse. Thank you so much. You can find the
Bayağı
post-launch news
gecikme var lan.
conference on NASA's YouTube. They did a great job breaking down the ascent and what it looks like for this rendezvous profile. So if you want to go back, take a look at NASA's YouTube, you can search for the Crew 7 post-launch news conference and it should come right up. Next question is when will Crew 7 be back to Earth?
Evet. Şu an Twitter'dan yani X'ten gelen soruları yanıtlıyorlar. Görevi 7 göreviyle alakalı. Bazıları galiba.
So Crew 7 will be up there for about 6 months and come back.
6 ay orada duracaklar ve deney falan yapacaklar işte. 6 ayın sonunda da geri dönecekler.
Up and above the International Space Station because we'll be docking to that zenith port. So again, like I mentioned earlier, we were looking directly down on Dragon with the Earth below it. Pretty soon, Dragon will be looking directly down on the International Space Station with the Earth below it. Looks like right now they are flying off the west coast of Senegal, about 260 statute miles above Earth.
Böyle parlak lan. Aha. Şu an dünyadan hala yakın gibi ama yalnız şu çizgi çok iyi ya. Sana. Bayağı iyi. Hala devam ediyor ve hızlı gidiyor lan galiba biraz.
And if you're just now joining us, you are tuned in to the Crew 7 mission.
Evet, yeni katılanlara açıklıyoruz ne yaptıklarını.
Last night at 12:27 a.m. Eastern Time, excuse me, 12:27 a.m. Pacific Time, 3:27 a.m. Eastern Time. And now the crew is making their way to the International Space Station. We've already had a few burns. We've passed through checkpoint waypoint 0, and now the vehicle is swinging up towards waypoint 1. We are just under 25 minutes away from the expected time of arrival to waypoint 1, which will put the vehicle in line with the docking adapter on the International Space Station, and also put the vehicle directly above the International Space Station.
Müthiş ya.
So if you're tracking, that's an almost 30-hour ride to orbit. The crew are suited up now. They are in their seats. They have not had to do so during the flight. And we just got a really cool view of one of those Draco thrusters firing, helping us fine-tune our approach to the space station. Our 4 crew members arriving today: Jasmine Mogbelli, Andreas Mogensen, Satoshi Furukawa, and Konstantin Borisov. Dragon looks pretty small in this picture, but we are getting
Evet,
closer.
buradan Dragon kaplığı çok küçük görünüyor. Halbuki değil ama biz şu an bayağı uzaktayız tabii ki.
20 meters directly above the station. We'll pass through that, head to waypoint 2, which is a hold point. It can be a brief pause.
220 metre uzunluğundan yaklaşık derecede. Aynen. Galiba anladığım kadarıyla istasyonun 220 metre uzandan geçti.
The other astronauts and cosmonauts living on the station right now are Stephen Bowen, Woody Hoberg, Sultan Al-Nayati, Andrei Fedyayev, Frank Rubio,
Evet, 3 tane astronot var. Stephen ve bir dakika. Woody Hoberg ve Sultan isimli biri. Ya da o şey mi lan? Diğer isim mi acaba? Ya da diğeri de olabilir. 3 tane astronot şu an gidiyor. Evet, iyice küçücük gözükmeye başladılar. Yine bir sessizlik çöktü. Bir anda sessizlik çocuk konuşmaya başlıyorlar ya bir anda böyle. O bazen insanı korkutuyor.
Just had a view from the International Space Station looking at Dragon from a bit further away, and now we've got a very good close-up as Dragon gets closer and closer to the International Space Station.
Yeah, looking
Evet.
crystal clear. Again, that nose
Uluslararası
cone is
Uzay
open. Of
İstasyonuna daha da
course, when we
yaklaşıyor diyor.
launch, it is closed. And when we re-enter Earth's atmosphere, it's closed to protect that docking mechanism that's beneath it. So that's exactly the point that'll line up with that zenith port on the International Space Station. It'll dock. The teams on the space station will take some time to make sure they pressurize the vestibule. That's the space between the Dragon hatch and the space station hatch. So when Dragon docks, that space is going to be out of vacuum. It's been previously exposed to outer space. And we want to make sure that it's equalized before we open up those hatches and the crew floats in. So that is a process that takes about an hour-ish, you know, making sure that we've got all those levels equaled out before we welcome the crew aboard the space station. Yeah, this is another view from the International Space Station. You can see one of the robotic arms on the left, and close to center of your screen, that is Dragon.
15 dakika ne ara geçti be? Aha,
That robotic arm
istasyon
is attached to the
galiba.
Japan exposed facility, so we are able to put some of our experiments outside in the vacuum of space.
Aa, çok güzel değil mi ya? Lan şurada böyle boşlukta yürümek. Of. Bazı videolar vardı böyle adam taklalar markalar atıyor uzay aracının içinde. Yine NASA'nın yüklediği bir videoydu. Çok yıllar önce tabii ki. Ama çok güzeldi. Harbiden çok güzeldi bak. Müthiş abi, müthiş. Nasıl bir şey lan acaba? Yani düşünsene, yer çekimi yok. Bayağı garip yani. Ve çok eğlencelidir bence. Çünkü izlediğim videolardan bayağı eğleniyordu. Uçuyor böyle kafasına basınca.
Again, we are about 23-22 minutes away from waypoint 1, reaching waypoint 1. Can be used as a hold point. We do not anticipate doing so today. We're heading to the zenith port of the space station on node 2, and it'll continue flying in. It'll be on that docking corridor until it's about 20 meters away. And we are looking for docking today at 9:08 a.m. Eastern Time, 6:08 a.m. Pacific Time.
Evet, ilk varış
And this again
noktaları
is Dragon Endurance that we're looking at.
birinciye geliyorlar.
Flew first on the Crew 3 mission.
Galiba orada ne
Also flew
yapacaklar?
the
Bir
Crew 5 astronauts on
benzin
the
falan
International
alacaklarını da
Space
dedi
Station.
anladın.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Expect reconfiguration of the C2V2 return link shortly.
Var ya şu onun açık mı acaba? Aha ne oluyor lan? Aa, iyice parlamaya başladı. Demek ki bayağı hızlı gidiyor. Aa, müthiş ya. Baksana oğlum. Kapkaranlık lan.
And a reminder, we are taking your questions on X with the hashtag #AskNASA. So if there's something
Evet,
you're curious about,
X'te
let us
yani
know.
Twitter'da
This
yeni adıyla
question
X'te
from Jack.
NASA etiketiyle
Astronauts
sorularınızı
doing
sorabilirsiniz
between
diyor.
launch and docking.
Biri sormuş mesela.
Well, they've been floating around a bit, but they have had some rest periods, some meal periods. You know, they're able to eat while they're in microgravity as they're making their way to the International Space Station. After ascent, once they made it to orbit, they were able to get out of their spacesuits and actually enjoy microgravity. And they've also, you know, needed to follow some procedures as we're
Ya
getting
bak soru soruyor orada.
as they're making their way to the International Space Station. After ascent, once they made it to orbit, they were able to get out of their
Bakın neydi
spacesuits
ya?
and actually enjoy microgravity.
Choose from, and
Launch
while we're
kalkış.
here after docking, they will report out
Kalk.
what was
O
consumed. Not
roketin
necessarily
kalkış
the
anıyla
food
falan ne
itself, but
yapıyorlar
they'll
galiba.
say this many
Evet,
packets
Türk
out
herhalde
this
roket
bad.
atmadan önce
Everything is so
yanmıştı orada.
meticulously tracked in space and on the International Space Station. It can be difficult. You know, it's not the same as here on Earth. If I put something down on the table, I know it's going to stay there thanks to gravity. But on the International Space Station, we want to make sure we know where everything is at all times because it can float away pretty easily. So just reporting also what was consumed, that gives the teams here in Hawthorne as well as in Houston a good look at, you know, what is also available for later use as well.
Yeah, and on the broadcast for the launch of Crew 7, NASA astronaut Jessica Meir actually mentioned, you know, how good the meals ready to eat actually are. She really gave an ode to, you know, how cool it is to be able to bring, you know, some flavors from, you know, some of the astronauts' like favorite types of food with them to the International Space Station. On Dragon, they aren't able to heat up any of the food, but they are able to hydrate any dehydrated food while on Dragon. And then once they get to the International Space Station, they actually do have the ability to warm up food and have a hot meal. And we do have another question. Again, as a reminder, we are taking questions on X with the hashtag AskNASA. Do the astronauts stay in that seated position the entire trip there?
Evet, koltuklarına
So Crew 7,
pozisyonları
that would be for
bekliyorlar
3
herhalde.
hours.
Astronotlar.
Yeah, no, that doesn't sound super
Ha, bir
comfortable,
soru
and
sonra.
thankfully they don't have to. So like we talked about, you know, after they get on orbit, after they're out of that dynamic period of flight, the nose cone is opened, they get a call from the Corps here in Hawthorne that they can get out of their seats as well as their suits. So they're able to take their suits off and kind of be in their own comfortable clothing,
Galiba
whatever they've worn underneath. We talked about, you know, after they get on orbit, after they're out of that dynamic period of flight, the nose cone is opened, they get a call from the Corps here in Hawthorne that
sürekli
they can get out of
aynı
their seats
pozisyonlara
as
bakan
well as their suits.
bu
So they're
mu?
able to take their suits off and kind of be in their own comfortable clothing, whatever they've worn underneath. We ask them to put those back on shortly before we are about 15 minutes from waypoint 1. Again, our next pit stop on the way to the space station, about 220 meters above the Node 2 Zenith docking port.
And Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. C2V2 link reconfiguration is complete. Could you give us a quick tom check?
SpaceX Dragon, tom check on the big loop.
We have you 5x5.
Hearing that conversation between the Corps and the crew, that is Shiva Bharavaj down there in Mission Control, Hawthorne. And they were talking about C2V2, that's Common Communications for Visiting Vehicles. So the Dragon spacecraft and International Space Station both use this language essentially to talk with each other, and it is properly configured so they continue to have good communication between both of those spacecraft.
Hala bir parlak bir yıldız gibi gitmeye devam ediyor. Evet, yine bir sessizlik.
So currently on board the International Space Station, judging by the timeline, it looks like Woody Hobart is now in position and monitoring Dragon's approach. They can actually send commands from Dragon or from the International Space Station to Dragon if need be, if there was some reason that we needed the spacecraft to retreat. Obviously, we're not tracking anything this morning, but he'll be monitoring that approach as they get closer all the way through docking, and then he'll be the person to work through the depressurization of the vestibule and make it a welcoming transition from Dragon to the space station for the 4 new crew members.
And we are currently maneuvering from waypoint 0 to waypoint 1. We are expecting to arrive at the waypoint 1 checkpoint at 5:59 a.m. Pacific time. And again, this will put Dragon directly above the International Space Station. So you could see on your screen, Dragon made its way to waypoint 0, which was directly under the International Space Station, so between Earth and the International Space Station. And now it is swinging upwards and will be above the International Space Station, basically on the space side of the station. And again, we are expecting that arrival at waypoint 1 at 5:59 a.m. Pacific time.
And we got the go from the International Space Station team that they are good to
Evet, buradan
have Dragon proceed
Space
past
Center'daki astronaut yanına gideceğiz de.
So waypoint 1, they will stop at waypoint 2 again. That's about 20 meters from the space station. That's the final checkpoint before moving in.
Son kontrol noktasına
And we expect to
varacaklar.
see them at waypoint
Galiba
1
uzay
about 12
istasyonu 20
minutes
metre
from now.
yakınında.
Shortly after that, it
Yakınında.
moves pretty quickly. It is slow and steady, but at the same time, we're anticipating docking at 6:08 a.m. Pacific. That is 9:08 a.m. Eastern time. So just about 30 minutes from now, we should see our new crew arrive at the space station. Of course, if we needed to, we can hold at waypoint 2 for quite a while, just to make sure we have conditions on the spacecraft, on the International Space Station, any lighting conditions, just the way we want them before we move on in.
And just to recap some of our milestones, we had an approach initiation burn at 4:29 a.m. Pacific time. That's 7:29 p.m. a.m. Eastern time. As well as we did require an approach initiation mid-course maneuver, which happened at 4:56 a.m. Pacific time, 7:56 a.m. Eastern time. And again, we've passed through waypoint 0. We're on our way to waypoint 1. And as Leah mentioned, after waypoint 1 is waypoint 2, just 20 meters from the International Space Station. There will be that will be a checkpoint where they will make sure that everything is good before docking. And again, docking is autonomous. Dragon is an autonomous vehicle, so the astronauts still are just monitoring all the way until the vehicle basically latches onto the International Space Station.
We'll start hearing more and more chatter too as we get closer between all the crew members. And one of the call-outs that we'll hear just as the crew is about to make contact with the International Space Station is CHOP, or that stands for Crew Hands-Off Point. That's about 2 meters from the space station. At that point, the crew should not be sending any commands to Dragon. However, again, we really don't anticipate that they would be, because it is an autonomous docking. So about 10 minutes away till we reach waypoint 1. Again, we're going to move right on through, head to that waypoint 2 hold point, and then we are about 20 minutes away from docking itself.
Geri geldim. Bir su alıp. En son mutfaktan duyabildiklerim unuttum da. Ne dediler acaba en son?
So again, we're docking to the Node 2 Zenith port today. That's the space-facing port. And this is, we may not see the docking. We may see it, but we have two bands of communication on the International Space Station. We have the KU band, which is how our video comes down. We have the S band, that's our sound and audio. The KU band antenna, we do something called KU masking. So we send commands to this antenna to not radiate in a certain area because it could reflect off of Dragon and the International Space Station. So we don't want that to radiate onto Dragon and back on the antenna itself. It can damage the antenna. It's a higher power KU link, so we don't want to damage that antenna dish if we don't have to, obviously. It can, risk the electronics inside, any tracking sensors. So we may not see docking. There is still a possibility. It just kind of depends on the location of those antennas at the time. But if we don't have video of the docking from that one location, obviously we will still have audio communications as well as comms with the crew
En iyi
to let us
şekilde
know
hala
that Dragon has arrived.
kapsülden ses ve görüntümüz var ya. Aha. O neydi lan? O neydi lan öyle? Allah Allah. Ya bir dakika dışarıda insanların sesleri geliyor ama buraya yansımıyordur da o.
Again, if you're just now joining us, you are tuned into the Crew 7 mission. The Crew
Evet, yeni
7
katılanlar yine
is
söylüyor
inside
ne
of
olduğunu
that
falan.
Dragon vehicle that you see there on your screen.
Evet, gördüğünüz
Currently
ekranınızdaki
making their way
araçta
to waypoint 1, which we expect to reach and pass through
bir
without
varış
a
noktası
hold
var
in
işte
about
ve
7
oraya
minutes or so from now.
7 dakikadır oraya gidiyoruz şu anda. Olay oraya sağlam bir şekilde varmalı. Şu ilk şeyler başlasın artık ya. Bildiğin yani normal bir insanı artık götürme göreve uzaya. Çok iyi olur. Bura ne oğlum
This
böyle
view
ya?
coming from a camera on the
Çok garip.
International Space Station of Dragon continuing its approach. Again, we are going up and above the space station, so we may eventually have some views of Dragon looking down on the station with the Earth below it. We do anticipate entering an orbital nighttime here shortly. It looks about like 10 minutes till the next sunset. Currently flying 269 statute miles over the Indian Ocean, south of Africa.
Afrika'nın güneyindelermiş dedi ama şu anda dünyanın o tarafta, dünyadan başka falan. Aha. Bak yine farklı bir bakış açısı. Yaklaşıyor buraya yavaş yavaş. Burası herhalde kapsülün geleceği yer. Yani başka neresi olacak zaten de.
Another view here from the International Space Station. Dragon is that big bright object pretty much in the center of your screen.
Aha, uzay istasyonu.
And this view and mission Mission Control Hawthorne
Altında
here
kontrolden
at SpaceX
kontrol
headquarters.
yerinden görüntü verdiler.
So we do see, we just had some great views of Dragon from the International Space
Az önce
Station.
Dragon'un
We've had views of the
muhteşem manzarasını
station
izledik.
from Dragon. We use the tracking data
Biliyorsunuz
relay
ki.
satellite systems as we orbit around the Earth. So we have these handover periods when the space station's satellites are transferring essentially from one to the other, that KU band, as we were talking about, that video comms coming down. We have these short handover periods within which we're, again, switching those ground stations or the satellites, making sure we pick up shortly. So these are planned, or they're tracked, essentially. We can also extend these if needed. So sometimes we can get a little more time on a different satellite. Let's say we're on a spacewalk and we don't want to have maybe a 10-minute loss of comm. So we're able to work with the other users of these satellites or these ground stations and make sure that we're getting constant communication at that time. So right now we are taking views from Mission Control Hawthorne on the left, Mission Control Houston on the right, as we are getting into these dynamic operations when we will be seeing Dragon get even closer to the International Space Station.
And both of these teams on your screen are actively working. They're currently working in tandem as we need both the team monitoring
Evet, şu an
Dragon
ekran
to
kişiler
coordinate
aktif
with the
olarak
team
bu görev
monitoring the
yapılırken
International
çalışıyorlar
Space
da.
Station, as we are basically bringing the two
Şu anda
together
görüntüleri
as we
veriyorlar.
speak.
Baksana lan kaç kişi var.
So again, we do expect to get those communications back, those videos back from Dragon and from the space station pretty shortly. But we are tracking to arrive at waypoint 1. Again, we're passing right through waypoint 1 today. We didn't have the need to stop. Both teams pulled
Evet,
that they are go to pass through.
waypoint 1'e tekrar varmak için oradan
But we're
geçiyorlar
expecting
da.
to see or hear that call out of waypoint 1 in just a couple of
Evet,
minutes.
geçip gidecekler
Again,
ve
we're tracking
dibe inmek için.
Dragon SpaceX on the big loop, approach 1 and soft capture ring extension will begin shortly.
Ve
Expect
SpaceX
Dragon to continue approach
Big
to
Loop'u
waypoint 0.
yaklaşıyor dedi.
SpaceX Dragon copies all.
Evet, Dragon gidebilir dedi artık. Gitmeye dedi daha doğrusu. Evet.
All right, right on time. We are again expecting waypoint 1 arrival in just a couple of minutes. Docking could happen as soon as 10 minutes from now. Also heard the call to the crew that the soft capture ring extension will begin shortly. That's the first step in
Evet, kısa bir süre sonra başlayacak dedi.
and this ring will retract, pulling Dragon into the International Space Station, that international docking adapter, and then there are a set of 12 hooks that
Dragon'u
will
yavaşça
securely
uzay
attach
istasyonuna
Dragon
çekecekler.
to the docking adapter. That's what we call hard capture. After that, we'll get into our depressurization of the vestibule.
Evet. Herkes
Also,
Android'un
docking
gelmesini
is
bekliyor.
where the Dragon spacecraft will actually connect an umbilical, set up umbilicals to the space station, basically provide power to Dragon while it's on the International Space Station.
Ya bakalım gelsin artık ya. Vallahi gelsin.
So again, as we get closer to docking, if you are just joining us, this is
Evet, yeni bir eğer bize yeni katılıyorsunuz ya.
International Space Station. We have members aboard Endurance today.
Gemide 4 gemimiz var. İnsanlı uzay uçuşumuz var.
And Satoshi Furukawa. They are scheduled for about 10 minutes from now to arrive at the International Space Station.
İstasyonundaki 10 dakikadan az bir sürede varmaları planlanıyor. Ve yaklaşık 220 metre tamam.
We hear those Quindar tones. We like to pause to make sure that we can hear the real stars of the show. The teams in our mission control rooms talk with the crew members aboard the spacecraft.
Gemide mürettebat üyeleri konuşmalar dedi. Evet. Baksana kaç kişi var be. Herkes bilgisayardan durur kontrol ediyor tamam.
Pass through waypoint 1 at 5:59 a.m. Pacific time. So that may be why they may be trying to establish comms here. We'll see if we can get an update here shortly.
Evet, iletişim kurmaya çalışıyor. Bakalım bağlantı alabilecek mi?
Arriving here just within the next 10 minutes potentially. We have on the left, from the left, Jasmine O'Belly, NASA astronaut and the commander of Crew 7. To her right, pilot Andreas Mogensen. Next to him is Satoshi Furukawa, JAXA, Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut. And on the far right, Konstantin Borisov of Roscosmos.
Station, Houston on the big loop.
Evet, Houston büyük döngüleri.
Okay, Woody, we're ready for you to monitor approach per step 3 of 1.102 Dragon approach.
Evet, senin için hazır diyor.
Let us know when you're reviewing
Yaklaşılmasın diyor şu an.
ready for docking.
Evet, yerleştirme hazırda diyor. Yani direkt onu.
Excellent, and for your awareness, at waypoint 2, Dragon will briefly pause to align for docking and
Harika
then automatically
ya.
resume approach.
Evet, yaklaşım için hazırlanın dedi. Yayınla.
Right, and that was communication from the Capcom in
Evet, Capcom'dan gelen
Houston.
iletişim dedi.
Amy Dill this morning communicating with NASA astronaut Woody Hoberg on the International Space Station. Again, he's primed for monitoring this approach and docking of Dragon. So they are getting all set up on the space station side ahead of docking. Again, we're looking for that to happen around 6:08 a.m. Pacific time, so within the next few minutes.
Evet, Pasifik saatte 6 civarı.
Initial contact between Dragon and the International Space Station is expected, as Leah said, at 6:08 a.m. Pacific time, 9:08 a.m. Eastern time.
Evet, Dragon, Lia'nın da söylediği Uluslararası Uzay İstasyonuna bekliyordu. Dragon yani.
Waypoint 2, which is located inside of the keep-out sphere, about 20 meters away from the space station.
As we've talked about previously, all of these visiting vehicles take this phased approach to the space station. They stop at these predetermined gates for teams to run quick checks on the vehicle performance before approaching the space station. So we know slow and steady wins the race when it comes to bringing two spacecraft together. The docking operations require a really great deal of precision to make sure we're keeping the spacecraft and obviously the crew safe.
At the 20-meter distance from station's docking adapter, Dragon's approach will slow, and it will begin to align itself with the adapter to come in for the final approach.
Dragon will make its first initial soft contact with the adapter's soft capture ring, which will then retract to bring Dragon in for the hard capture sequence. As a further precaution, Dragon's soft capture system includes a set of rotary spring dampers that helps lessen the force of the contact between the capsule and the station. So for a little bit more of an update on what's happening on the International Space Station and in Houston, let's check in with Sandra Jones. Sandra?
Thanks, Leah. Right now, the crew on board Space Station is awake and preparing for the upcoming docking of Dragon to Space Station. Everything continuing to look good here on
Evet, her
the
şey
Space Station
güzel devam
side.
ediyor gözüküyor.
NASA astronaut Woody Hoberg will...
Soft capture ring extension is complete.
Ne diyor lan? Danjon bilgisayarlara bakıyorum. Çok karışık ya. Baksana etrafa.
Good words there up to the crew. So as I was saying, Hoburg will be in the station's cupola using special software to track Dragon's approach and make sure it
Dragon'ları
stays
takip
in the
etmek için özel bir yazılım
expected zones.
kullanılıyor
Hoburg
dedi.
will also be primed for hatch opening operations once Dragon is docked. He'll start by opening the large hatch on node 2 Zenith, which will give him access into the pressurized mating adapter. The crew will then have to pressurize the vestibule, which is the small space between the hatches on Dragon and space station.
And
This
Dragon
was exposed to
SpaceX on the big
vacuum
loop
prior to
ground has
docking.
pulled go
Test
for
kontrol ediyor şu an.
Please confirm visors are down and that you are ready for docking.
Evet. Bağlama için hazır olduğunu haber verin dedi. Gemiye sağlık vermek üzere.
Captains on the big loop go, and all crew members have visors down. We are ready.
Excellent news, Dragon. Ground is
Evet.
going to be
And-
enabled
Dragon'dan
to
harika haber
and
veriyor.
a reminder that after the crew hands-off point, retreat and breakout are not permitted.
I can copy.
Biz de konuşabilirim. Ya da söyleyebilirim.
And great calls again up to the crew, letting them know everything is
Evet,
going
ekipten yine
smoothly.
harika
We're
haberler
getting really
geliyor.
close to docking, just confirming that they have their visors down and they can be in that configuration ahead of docking. So everything good here from the space station side. I'll toss it back over to Hawthorne so that you guys can give us an update on your end.
Thanks, Sandra. And we did hear the Corps
Evet,
also
teşekkür ederim.
call out that call out CHOP, which is the crew
Evet, bir yerde
hands-off
SpaceX,
point.
bir yerde NASA.
Basically, that means that the crew must be hands-off.
Adamların bilgisayar bile siyah. Hava çok şehirli olmuş lan.
Now waypoint 2 is up
Baksana.
next, and that will put Dragon only 20 meters away
NASA'nın
from the space station.
kıyafetler
From
ya.
here, the spacecraft will focus on aligning its docking system with the International Docking Adapter.
Yeah, so we're getting pretty close. Right now it looks
Evet,
like
şu an
we
çok
are
yakın
about 80
gözüküyoruz öyle.
meters from the International Space Station. Again, we did not stop at waypoint 1 today. We just kept on moving through that 220 meter mark. We will hold briefly at waypoint 2. That just gives us a chance to do any final checks, make sure everybody's go before moving in for docking. Additionally, we heard previously that the soft capture ring is extended. That's what's going to make first contact with the
Arkadaş
International
abi nereye
Space
gidiyor
Station.
acaba?
It will then
Çok merak
pull
ediyorum.
Dragon into the International Space Station's International Docking Adapter before those 12 hooks begin to do that hard
Lan
capture.
düşünsene o arkadaki adam.
Securing into
Öylesine gelmiş buraya. Yolu arıyorum derken. Tabii öyle olamaz da. Mesela. Çok komik olmaz mı böyle bir şey?
And we are expecting initial contact between Dragon and the International Space Station any minute now.
Yeah, we are now 60 meters away from the space station. Again, this is really methodical. It's a very careful process as we prepare for docking, just to ensure the safety of the spacecraft. Like we mentioned, of course, the crew. And again, we do not have views from the International Space Station at this time, but we have
Evet,
good
istasyondan
confirmation
manzaralarımız var
that
yine.
is on the docking axis, continues to move in as planned. Sometimes we don't have these views as we are moving
Drone yanaşma ekseninde planlandığı gibi hareket ediyor. Hareket etmeye devam ediyor yani.
Additionally, sometimes we just don't have great views because it's nighttime on the space station. You know, we see sunrise or sunset every 45 minutes.
Evet, harika bir manzara yok dedi çünkü uzayda gece şu anda yani karanlık ya. Haliyle yok yani.
Dragon now 40 meters from the space station,
Evet, 40 metre yakınında. İyice yaklaştı. Dragon kaçtı. Aha.
And there you can see on your screen, this is a view from Dragon.
Evet, Dragon'dan bir görüntü var şu an kanalda dedi.
You can see how close it is. You can begin to see those details on the station.
Evet, yaklaştıkça daha detaylı bölgesini Aha.
was the international
Ay
docking
çok
adapter.
güzel değil mi
And
ya?
this view from inside Dragon Endurance itself. So these are
Çok güzel
our
ya.
4 crew members. You can only see the commander and pilot right now, Jasmine Mabelli and Andreas Mogensen, just monitoring the approach on those crew display panels. Again, they are not making commands at this point. Additionally, at that 2 meters away from the space
Evet,
station, we
uzay
hear the chop
istasyonundan
call,
20 metre
at which
uzaktılar.
point they should not send any commands. Right now, we are at 23 meters from the space station, continuing to close in on that zenith port of Node 2. Down toward the bottom of your screen, you can see the nose cone of Dragon Endeavour, which brought the crew 6
Yani buraya
astronauts
araç
to the
bağlanıyor.
International Space Station. So we're expecting to hear the call from
Vay
waypoint
vay.
2 shortly, where we will do a brief pause
Ya da bu direkt
before moving in towards the docking port.
evet, bağlanma noktaya doğru ilerliyor ya. Buradan bir şey yapıyor ama gözükmüyor. Abi mesela orada ne yazıyor ya? Mesela yani. Çok iyi oğlum. Aha.
Also, a cool thing in this view is Dragon is
Çok
now
güzel
directly
şey.
above the
Güzel
International
gözüküyor
Space
şu an.
Station. And you can tell in the view because you can see the clouds on Earth in the background.
And it looks like we have reached that 20-meter waypoint 2 mark.
Station, Houston on the big loop. Dragon is on final approach and is go for docking. Monitor for steps 5 and 6 in 1.102 Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
Houston Station copies all.
All right, confirmation from Amy Dill, the Capcom in Mission Control Houston, to the crew that they are moving in for docking. So we are now 16 meters away from the International Space Station. Again,
16 metre
continuing slowly into the Node 2
uzakta
zenith
uzay
for docking.
istasyonuna. İyice yaklaştılar yani.
Such a cool view. It almost feels
Çok
like
güzel
we're
bir
on Dragon,
görüntü şu an
approaching
vardı.
the International Space Station.
Hadi be abi gelin artık. Zannediyorum bu alanda da yayın bitecek galiba.
Space Station and Dragon now flying over Australia. And Dragon just 13 meters away. Again, a very methodical and careful approach to our docking port. Great views coming from Dragon this morning as we get ready
Yani
to
çok
welcome
reklam
our
alması
crew members
lazımdı.
to the orbiting laboratory.
Dragon is at 10 meters.
Metre 10 metre artık.
Copy, 10 meters.
Evet. Son 10 metre. Ya da şu an 10 metre. Hadi be abi gel artık. Nerede kaldın?
We are just moments away from Dragon docking with the International Space Station. First will be a soft capture, and then there will be 12 hooks deploying 6 at a time to create that hard capture between the vehicle and the
Yumuşak
station.
bir yakalama olacak size.
Dragon now just 7 meters away. Now 6
Evet.
meters away from the
Dragon
Node
artık
2
son
port.
7 metresi kaldı. Zaten iyice yaklaştık.
Copy, 5.
That call coming from Dragon Commander Jasmine Mabelli, her first space flight to the International Space Station.
Hadi
Standing
bakalım.
by for the call of crew hands off point or chop.
İyi, çok yaklaştı. Çok yaklaştı. Hadi lan.
Copy chop.
Aha. Sanırım artık bağlandı. Ha? Yok. Yok, çok yaklaştı. Hadi lan.
1 meter.
Son 1 metre. İyice. Kamera ne olacak lan? Ve hadi lan. Az kaldı az. Biraz daha. Herhalde tamam artık. Aynen.
And Dragon, we see soft capture complete and attenuation will begin shortly.
Evet, artık Dragon'un motivasyonu tamamlandı bile. Yani
And contact confirmed. 6:16 a.m. Pacific time. 261 statute miles over Australia.
ne oldu lan? Bu ses ne oldu?
Guys, thank you for the welcome.
And that welcome coming from the crew aboard the International Space Station. Endurance has
Evet,
arrived with
uzay
its
gemisinde Dünya
international
Fırlatma hoş
crew.
geldiniz dedi.
They will begin the hard capture sequence shortly, but we are now up to 11 crew members on the International Space Station after they float through the hatch this morning.
And on the big loop, ring retraction is in progress.
Evet, geri çekilme sürüyor dedi.
Copy is in retraction in progress.
Now, again, we don't have views right at this moment of Dragon on the International Space Station, but we did see that docking again at 6:16 a.m. Pacific time as the International Space Station and Dragon were flying 261 statute miles over Australia.
Aa, ne güzel ışık var lan orada. Şu bilgisayar yanında.
And there's still a few steps to complete before Dragon is securely attached to the
Evet,
station.
yürütmeden önce tamamlamamız gereken birkaç adım daha
That
var.
is, we've now done
Daha
the
iyi
soft capture,
sürecek
but then there
yani.
will be the completion of the soft capture ring retraction,
Yumuşak zaman
as
ancak
well
daha
as
sonra
hard
tamamlanmış
capture
olacak dedi.
sequence beginning, and then finally hard dock completing.
Ve
Again,
sabit
that will
programına
require 12
başlangıcımız.
hooks to deploy. Again, 6 at a time will deploy to make that hard capture completion.
Of course, once we have a successful hard capture, it still is going to take a little bit before we see our crew members float through the hatch into the International Space Station and officially bring us up to that total of 11, at least for about the next few days or so. We will first pressurize the vestibule. Well, Woody Hoberg will open the station side of the hatch. He will pressurize the vestibule, the space between both of those hatches, the Dragon hatch and the station hatch, bringing that to the same pressure as is inside Dragon and the space station. It's much of what we are used to here on Earth. Eventually, they will bring the crew members aboard. Again, they will give us a welcome ceremony. We'll get to see them and hear their first remarks about their visit to the space station, maybe what the ride was like. Then they will move right into work. They will start their safety briefing with the crew, making sure that they remember all their training from the ground, get brought up to speed on the International Space Station itself.
Yayın az sonra bitecek galiba. Zaten yayınları da approach and docking. Yani az bir
This
şey
Dragon
bana.
Endurance's third visit to the International Space Station, first on Crew 3, then with Crew 5, now Crew 7. It joins Dragon Endeavour. Both docked to the Node 2 module, also known as Harmony.
And that next step, soft capture ring retraction, is typically expected about 4 minutes after soft capture. So we should.
And Dragon, ring retraction is complete. The docking sequence is holding for
Evet, tamamlandı dedi.
reconfiguration.
Dragon copy.
And what perfect timing.
Evet, mükemmel
Soft
zamanlama.
capture ring retraction is now complete.
Yatalama artısının veri
As we
çekilmesi
mentioned earlier,
tamamlandı
during
dedi.
this time, we're also connecting an umbilical from Dragon to the station. Dragon has been using power generated by its solar arrays, also battery power. Once it's connected to the International Space Station, it can start using power from the station itself. You've got a great view of those solar arrays as
Evet,
we've been
Uluslararası
flying in
Uzay
this
İstasyonu
morning.
gücünü kullanmaya
And so
başlayabilir.
at this point, Dragon will probably start using the station power for the remainder of
Bu
its time on
araçta
the space station for these
uçarken
next 6 months.
güneş panelinin harika bir görüntüsünü yakaladık dedi.
Again, we do have soft capture complete for Dragon Endurance. We are standing by for the start of the hard capture sequence. This process takes several minutes, but it is the securing of 12 hooks from Dragon to the International Space Station, giving us that firm, secure hold.
MCS configured. Proceeding with hook driving.
Bu neydi ya? Kanca mı? Galiba. Yine bir sessizlik. Bakalım. Şu
And we did hear that call out, proceeding with hook driving. That is the beginning of the hard capture sequence. Again, as Leah was just mentioning, there will be 12 hooks, and they will deploy 6 at a time. So there'll be 6 hooks first. Once those are fully latched to the International Space Station, then the next set of 6 hooks will begin to deploy. And this process should take a few minutes, about 4 minutes or so, until hard docking is complete.
kaç dakikaya tamamlanacak dedi. Bağlaması herhalde. Az önce bağlanmamış mı?
Again, we welcomed Crew 7 to the International Space Station at 6:16 a.m. Pacific time this morning. Here's your view inside Dragon Endurance right now over the shoulder of our commander, Jasmine Mogbelli, and pilot Andreas Mogensen. It was Mogbelli's first trip to the International Space Station and Mogensen's second. This is also Konstantin Borisov's first trip to the International Space Station. And Satoshi Furukawa is returning as well. So he is the most experienced on this crew when it comes to days in space. I believe he has 165 days from previous missions.
Bura geminin altı var yok. Ama bağlanan yer olabilir.
This is the view that we saw as we were preparing for docking. It was
Takip görüntüleri
great
yaşanmış
of the
dedi.
docking port itself. Now that we have
Aynen,
completed
bağlantı
that
noktası.
soft capture, we are obviously pulled into the space station. And those first 6 hooks are driving. We are again in the hard capture process right now. So we'll see those first 6 hooks drive, followed by the second 6, at which point they will be considered officially hard docked to the space station.
Uzay İstasyonuna resmi olarak bağlanacak diye. Bakalım. Zaten yayının sonunu geleceğiz yani. Yani tam bağlandığında ve astronotlar çıktığında herhalde bitecek sanırım.
Getting some good progress on the hooks driving. It looks like the second 6 are now starting to drive.
Bir saat olmuş be yayında olalı. Geleli bir saat oldu.
Meanwhile, on the International Space Station, again, it is a Sunday, so it is considered an off-duty day.
Orada yine Uzay İstasyonunda
The 3 cosmonauts currently on board are eating their midday
kozmonot
meal.
var.
Meanwhile, Woody Hoberg is monitoring Dragon's docking. He will eventually assist with the pressurization of the vestibule, the hatch openings, and welcoming the crew on board.
Ya hadi araç gösterin, uzay gösterin. Burayı görmek istemiyorum. Burayı görmeye gelmedim oğlum ben. En az var ya 4-5 dakikadır buradayız. Burayı gösteriyorlar yani anlamında. Hadi oğlum.
And on the big loop, hard capture is complete.
Evet, tamamlandı dedi. Bağlantı tamamlandı.
Dragon copies, raising visors.
Az dışarı ne güzel ha. Ofisin dışarısı. Garip yani biraz. Aa, müthiş değil mi ya? Ofis bile iyi. Aha. Mesela bunların hangisi SpaceX ofisi, hangisi NASA ofisi? Bir amblem de göremiyorum. Aha. Evet, aynı katıldıysanız diyor. Yine açık görüşte.
NASA SpaceX Crew 7 mission, and the crew has just docked to the International Space Station. Hard capture has been confirmed, and the crew lifted off from Space Launch Complex 39A on Friday early morning at 12:27 a.m. Pacific Time, 3:27 a.m. Eastern Time. About 30 hours later, they are now docked to the International Space Station.
Now that docking of our 4 crew members coming at 6:16 a.m. Pacific Time.
Houston Station on the big loop, PMA ingress step 1.1.
Şu an 2 kişi izliyor. Aynen 2 kişi.
And Woody, we're not quite ready for that step yet. We'll let you know when we are.
Oradan kişiye de buradan hoş geldin diyorum.
Again, those comms coming from Mission Control Houston, the Capcom there, speaking with Woody Hoberg aboard the International Space Station, who's been monitoring the approach and arrival of Dragon, as well as the pressurization at the vestibule, the hatch opening that we'll see over the next couple of hours. Docking came this morning at 6:16 a.m. Pacific Time, 9:16 a.m. Eastern Time, as the spacecraft and the International Space Station were flying over Australia. We've again seen completion of soft capture as well as of hard capture.
And on the big loop, docking sequence is complete. Dragon, welcome, Vilkom, Yokoso, Dobro Pожаловать to the International Space Station.
I said from Dragon on the big loop, thank you so much. I had to keep reminding myself this is not just a dream. Thank you to the entire SpaceX team, to those who worked on the Falcon 9, on our Dragon, and even on preparing us, especially our training lead, Paul Weiss. We had to keep reminding ourselves that when we open that hatch, we're not walking out into the training center. I'll hand it over to Andy for a few words.
Yeah, I want to thank everyone at SpaceX as well, including everyone at our respective partner agencies for getting us this far. this is the first step of the journey. The real mission begins now on board the
Evet,
International
yolcunun
Space
ilk görevi,
Station.
gerçek görev şimdi başlıyor.
Ahead of us.
Uluslararası Uzay İstasyonundaki günü.
And thank you to everyone at our agencies for preparing us.
Herkese teşekkür ederiz.
Getting ready.
Evet, hazır gözüküyor üzere.
This is Satoshi. It was just like a training session in Falcon, California, and I'd like to
Bir deneme gibi gözüküyor.
my appreciation to NASA, ESA, CSA, Roscosmos, JAXA, and especially SpaceX for flying us safely to the International Space Station. Thank you. Thanks all. It was exciting. Like my friend said, it was really close to what we have experienced during the training. We just had to remind ourselves that it's happening for real. Very excited, very happy to be on ISS. Looking forward to opening that hatch. Thanks all the agencies. Thanks Paul. Thanks the team. We're really excited to be here. Thanks SpaceX for this marvelous vehicle. Thanks.
Evet, teşekkürler. Katılanlara çıkan. Zannediyorum artık yayın bitti galiba.
And Dragon SpaceX on the big loop on behalf of SpaceX, we want to thank you for training with us.
Evet, bizi tuttuğunuz için size teşekkür ederiz.
Ground will be enabling our hardline power and communication connections. You are go to DOF suits per 4.012, and we're going to be taking cameras external.
SpaceX Dragon copies all. We'll step into 4.012 suit docking and audio configuration.
And some awesome words from the core, our core here, Shiva Bharavaj, speaking in every language to the crew, which was pretty awesome, welcoming the crew to the
Harbiden
International Space Station.
o
Crew
içi boş
also
verdi.
saying some amazing, kind words. That was really awesome to hear. Now that Dragon has completed the docking sequence, the spacecraft must undergo a handful of checks before we will be able to open the hatch. The crew on board Dragon will now get a chance to get out of their suits before moving into hatch operations.
That's right, and things will begin picking up inside the station too as NASA's Woody Hoberg gets the hatch on the station side ready to be open, starts pressurizing that area known as the vestibule between the Dragon and station hatches. So with Dragon docked, that's going to do it for us here in Hawthorne, but our coverage for Crew 7 doesn't stop here. If you stay tuned, we'll have NASA's Sandra Jones in Houston continuing to walk you through the pressurization of that vestibule, the hatch opening as well.
We're going to toss it to Sandra at Mission Control Houston to take us through the vestibule pressurization and hatch opening when we'll see NASA astronauts Jasmine Mogbelli, Andreas Mogeson, Satoshi Furukawa, and Konstantin Borisov float into the International Space Station. But first, let's quickly recap how they got there. They suited
Buraya
up
nasıl
in the
bakalım
pseudo-crew
hepsine.
and rode in the Teslas on the way to the pad to their launch site. They then
Tesla
compressed
var
the
orada.
Dragon vehicle and lifted off from Kennedy Space Center at pad 39A at 3:27 a.m. Eastern Time on Friday morning. Stage 1 came back to land on landing zone 1, and Dragon separated from Falcon 9's second stage, and then the nose cone deployed, as well as we had a few major burns, burns on Dragon to enable them to get to the International Space Station, and docking confirmed at 6:16 a.m. Pacific Time, 9:16 a.m. Eastern Time on Sunday, August 27th.
Yeah, so now that Crew 7 has arrived, we are looking ahead to
Şu
the
an
return of
başladı.
Crew 6. We'll be taking you along as Steve Bowen, Woody Hoberg, Sultan Al-Nayadi, and Andrei Fedyayev return home after their long-duration stay aboard the station. Our teams are assessing return dates, which will be announced on nasa.gov, so be sure to tune in as NASA and SpaceX bring you live coverage every step of their journey. Also, be sure to follow SpaceX and NASA on social media for real-time updates. Thanks again for watching. Go NASA, go SpaceX,
Gerçek
and
zaman
go
güncellemeleri için
Crew 7
sosyal
and
medyadan
Crew 6.
bizi takip
Now
edebilirsiniz.
sending it over to Sandra at the Johnson Space Center in Houston to continue sharing the mission as the crew prepares to return home for the
Görevi
next 6
paylaşmaya devam
months, the
edecekleri.
International Space Station. For those of you watching on the
6
SpaceX
ay
YouTube
boyunca
channel,
orada
please head over to NASA TV to follow the
çalışma
coverage live,
yapacaklar.
and we'll see you soon.
Yakında görüşürüz dedi ve sanırım artık yayın bitti. Evet. Zannediyorum. Bakalım daha bir şey olacak mı ama zannetmiyorum olacağını. Artık yayın bitti galiba. Bu arada yaptılar ha kaç? Tabii iki buçuk saatleri buradayız. Tabii aslında ben pek bekletmedim sizi. Başlangıçtan biraz almıştım. Evet ve bitti. Arkadaşlar katıldığınız için çok teşekkür ediyorum.
Soft capture complete.
Katıldığınız için teşekkürler. Bir dahaki canlı yayında görüşmek üzere. Daha çok canlı yayın yapacağım. Dediğim gibi başka görevler de olacak elbet. Şu anda SpaceX'de bu arada. Görevi 7 görev kontrol sesini canlı yayın yapıyor. Canlı yayında izleyenlere teşekkür ediyorum. Hoşça kalın. Bay bay.